Hello, this is Kris Nelson from evolveconsciousness.org. I'll be reading the article, The True Self Seeks Truth and Morality. This was published on the 22nd of September 2014. Most people try to live by their idea of the good, but their ability to actualize the real good is limited by various barriers. Many falsities are accepted as, quote, truth, and this creates a delusional perceptual reality framework that blinds us to what is actually happening. Once we dig deeper into the false reality we have been conditioned into, we begin to uncover the hidden reality that exists outside of the normalized vision people are made to see with. Only by knowing the ways you are being deceived and made to believe in falsity can you begin to progress in evolving consciousness and actualizing the true self, living in the path and way of truth, love, good, right, morality, natural law, higher self, higher will, which is the true self. The conditioning into falsity has the true self inhibited from living out what is right, good, and true to the fullest potential. It is there at the core of our being, but has been masked and overridden by subsequent programming into the conditioning of false living that pre-exists in society. The current conditions are the template we use to copy and conform to society and its normalcy. The falsities of society then become false proxy substitutes for the real thing, truth, morals, values, that we deeply long to live, exemplify, and embody deep down to our core being, but are denied the greater realization, actualization, individuation, and fulfillment of that true self. The consciousness self, in this existence as the ego personality identity construct, is programmable and as such can receive input from different sources to develop it into what it becomes. Garbage in, garbage out. Quality in, quality out. Where does our time, attention, energy, effort, determination, dedication, and persistence go? We need to prioritize learning truth and morality and making it the default way of living it. Social normacy describes the acceptability provided by the conventions of society. Successful integration into social constructs is dependent upon the compliance and conformity with the normalcy of that social subsystem. Each successive subconstruct is more individuated towards a particular conditioned form or image. This is seen in duty and responsibility towards false ways of living that are believed to be legitimate. This is obvious in the degrees of devotion of various constructs man creates, such as fashion groupings, particular activities people group themselves around, in-group versus out-group identifications of other kind, such as police, military, elitism, and other favoritism for social acceptability. So when I say the particular conditioned form or the subconstruct is individuated more towards a particular conditioned form or image, well, that would be, specifically, fashion or certain hairstyles or certain social groupings, certain activities, and those are individuations of a form or image that people collectively associate themselves around and construct their sense of identity around. These subsystems and subconstructs set themselves apart from the greater aggregate collective of the culture civilization and provide directed avenues of structured variability. This so-called variability is a false proxy of individuality and leads one to become attached to a pseudo-individuality construct. These are pathways and avenues of so-called freedom for people to allegedly choose from in the process of forming their self-images and identities. So this is how the variable subsystems and subconstructs of the overall system we live in, these are avenues and pathways for us to choose how we form our self-images, our identities from. For the most part, these pre-selected paths also provide a rechanneling of the energy of each individual unit into a, quote, free market allocation of their universal constructability. So this is how we're channeled into pre-selected pathways in order to direct our energy into the avenues that are already existing for us to continue perpetuating and feeding the system, to put our energy into keeping the system going, because the system doesn't exist. It's an aggregate creation of humans putting in their energy in order to make the system exist. The beast, the system, is fed by us. If we do not feed the beast, if we do not engage in the systemic ways of living, the cyclical loop, the hamster wheel, then it will go away. So it's more about not doing things than about doing new things. You need to remove yourself from the old things in order to do the new things. So there's a process. It's not, well, just do new things. Well, first you have to stop doing the wrong, then you can actually do an accurate right. So it's mostly apophatic, seeking the negative, seeking the evil, and seeking to understand the negative and the evil so that you can not do it anymore and know that you're not doing it so that you can actually do good properly. We are universal constructors, capable of performing an almost infinite number of tasks and operations to sustain, maintain, procure, preserve, protect, and project the system of control and enslavement. We sustain the system by being interchangeable universal constructor pieces capable of fitting themselves into a particular avenue or pathway of energy generation within the system as a replaceable cog in the machine. In the scientific dictatorship of pure utilitarianism and systems thinking, we are essentially just numbers, human resources, energy units to be used to accomplish specific goals, controlled in a similar way to the hive mind of queens in insect colonies. So the aspect of being controlled as a hive mind is the collective public consciousness that we're collectively conditioned with as part of integration into the social norms and boundaries of acceptability. And then utilitarian systems thinking is the greater good, and it's a disintegration of the individual in favor of the collective. And we are the individual universal constructors because we can be placed anywhere within the system. Essentially, all we have to do is be indoctrinated or trained from a young age into a particular pathway of knowledge, a certain body of knowledge, in order to fulfill a function within the system. In that way, we sustain, maintain, procure, preserve, protect, and project the system of control and enslavement because we're compartmentalized, ignorant fools who require an economic survivability aspect to our lives because we have to pay for even having a place to live, and we can't have our own land to live ourselves if we want to be completely free without any aspect of the system. We can't even be free from the system. There's nowhere on the planet you can, well, except in the north, I guess, in the Arctic and wherever you can't, wherever the governments haven't set up a populace. But well, even in Canada, there's Nunavut and there's Canada. It's even so you can't really go anywhere. So we're all replaceable as well. So we're all there for energy generation. That's why we're channeled into certain pathways. They rechannel us instead of us channeling ourselves in alignment with truth and morality. The system, through its engineering of the ego personality identity construct, through the collective hive mind group conditioning aspect, we conform to the norms of acceptability and stay within those pathways, and we don't go for the depth of truth and morality, which is contrary to the acceptable norms of society, which would cause conflict, tension, and pressure. And if you're one against many, a lot of the times the issue can be severe and the one person can be completely eradicated by the many. You can just kill that one person, essentially. You can murder them. It's an unlawful killing, so it's a murder because the person didn't do any harm. They were just speaking truth and morality. But it's so contrary to the conditioned hive mind that we have in society, in the systems thinking, that it's whatever the collective is, that's what's determined as good. So it's not an objective valuation of good and evil, right and wrong. It's just a utilitarian. Whatever is good for the collective is what becomes good, and the individual matters less. So I'll just continue now. We have to work to remove the falsity in order to let that which is, truth and morality, shine through unadulterated from our core being. It can be viewed in this negative pathway of removing falsity, or as actively bringing in what is right, good, and true in order to realize, and identify the falsity to remove it. So that probably sounded like 3 words that I just repeated, but you need to have realize in order to realize the real lies. And the negative pathway of removing falsity isn't a negative and harmful pathway, it's just an apophatic pathway to let the truth and morality shine through by removing what we are not and becoming what we should be, which is the true self. To demonstrate how the true self is the embodiment of natural law, the higher will, the higher self, which is the true self, we can look at how others have spoken similarly regarding the inherent aspect of our core being and the effects of falsity. Here I have a quote from Manhood of Humanity, page 53. Humans can be literally poisoned by false ideas and false teachings. Many people have a just horror at the thought of putting poison into tea or coffee, but seem unable to realize that when they teach false ideas and false doctrines, they are poisoning the time-binding capacity of their fellow men and women. One has to stop and think. There is nothing mystical about the fact that ideas and words are energies which powerfully affect the physical-chemical base of our time-binding activities. Humans are thus made untrue to human nature. So I think this is a book by Alfred Korzybski. I was reading it, but it has some aspects of natural law, but I wasn't interested to keep reading it, so I stopped reading. Well, essentially, they're saying the same thing, that humans are thus made untrue to human nature. The human nature would be the true self. And when we have false ideas and false teachings, it takes us away from human nature, which is the true self. So when you remove the falsities from your being in the negative pathway, the apophatic pathway, then you allow the true human nature to actualize and realize and individuate within you. Or at least the capacity is more able to do it, since you've removed the falsity that was preventing you from even being able to actualize that. And the time-binding capacity just refers to our ability to comprehend long spans of time and manipulate things and plan ahead and remember in the past and build from the past and into the future, more so than the other animals. The only thing is Alfred Korzybski, I view his conceptions as a little bit ignorant. The whole part of it had a big part. It seemed like he was ranting about how man isn't an animal, which is clearly a falsehood. But he was trying to separate, and he was trying to say how man isn't part animal and part spirit or whatever. But these are just symbolic references, and animal is what man is. Man is an animal. We are an animal body, but we have more than that. And that's why the spirit aspect, symbolically we refer to the spirit and all these things, and whether it's true or not, it just allows us to understand ourselves, and we have consciousness. But he was all saying that, it's not the animal and spirit, and he was, I guess, against the church doctrine. And anyways, so there's a lot of symbolism that he didn't understand, and he clearly didn't understand how an animal is what man is. Anyways, so there was some useful information, but I didn't finish the book because it wasn't pertinent to what I wanted to look into at the moment. So maybe I'll get back to it at another time just to see what's in there and what I can gain from it. But at the time I wanted other things, and it wasn't what I expected. So I went on to other information to search for clarification and understanding my questions. The next one is Science and Sanity, page 31, and this is also by Alfred Korzybski. Theory and practice show that healthy, well-balanced people are naturally moral and ethical unless their educations have twisted their types of evaluations. We train students in consciousness of abstracting, consciousness of the multi-ordinal mechanisms of evaluation, relational orientations, etc., which bring about cortico-thalamic integration, and then as a result, morality, ethics, awareness of social responsibilities, etc., follow automatically. We're saying consciousness of abstracting. Well, if you're abstracting, then how come you couldn't recognize the universal of animal to which man belongs? So this is why in the two books, there's like a contradiction, and he's supposedly teaching about the consciousness of abstracting, because that's what consciousness is. It's an abstraction engine where we can pierce through the regular matter and physical appearances, and we can see behind the physicality, the metaphysics, which is why that's what the word means. It's I think, yeah, the meta in terms of behind. It's not above or higher, or in terms of the later convention that was added to meta. It's I think, yeah, it is behind it. So he doesn't see that animals is, a group that a genera that we belong to. And the consciousness of the multi-ordinal mechanisms of evaluation, well, that's just judgment, evaluation, judgment, discernment, distinction. And then, I don't know, cortical-thalamic integration, he's making a reference to brain physiology. Anyways, I'll continue. As a result of conditioning into falsity and living in the false self, our sense of good gets corrupted. Our true self is greatly diminished as a result of true care for truth and morality being so dim within us. The compass of care, compassion, empathy, conscience is out of whack, out of alignment with the inherent magnetic force of the true self. So I was saying magnetic force because I made reference to the compass of care, compassion, empathy, conscience being out of whack. So our magnetic force isn't pointing to, the true north of truth and morality, which is the true self. We're not leading ourselves in alignment with who we should actually be at a basic level of who we all are, which is what the true self is, the higher self. To continue, as a result of our attachment to the falsity we use as a basis to form our ego personality identity construct from, there are very few true measures of conduct anymore. People don't live by the objective right and good. They live their deeds based on what they can get away with what is subjectively right and good in their delusional, morally relativistic framework. The subconscious knows the conflict and absurdity of man's laws contradicting natural law. Therefore, people don't obey the ludicrousness of man's law in this semi-awareness, but yet never learn natural law correctly. They just do whatever they can get away with within man's law, while natural law is not even considered. You can do what you want as long as you don't get caught, becomes the life motto for conduct. This is also my understanding of depression as well, is even if we're not consciously aware, but we're subconsciously aware, and it's nagging at us, this conflict of, well, there's two aspects it could be of depression that I've come to understand in terms of non-chemical and actual brain malfunctioning. There's the aspect of misalignment with truth that's recognized, and there's the aspect of your false expectations do not match up to reality, which can cause depression. So now I'm talking about how the subconscious knows the conflict and absurdity of the world we're living, so it creates a conflict within us, and we go into counterculture and we rebel because of that recognition. But we can't consciously, we're not being conscious aware of reality, we're not thinking of reality, we're not bringing awareness, we're not inputting more of reality to become consciously aware, we're not questioning, doubting, and being curious. So we remain ignorant. To continue, if we want to realize, actualize, and individuate more of the true self, we seek out the falsity in us and the world, and seek to remove it. The true self is called the true self for a reason. It is about being a self in alignment with truth and morality, and it represents the higher self of truth and morality we are at the core of our being. Essentially our true nature, which is what human nature, which is what Korzybski was saying in Manhood of Humanity. Essentially our true nature, which would be the natural state if the false self and false living were to be removed. This is why standing for truth and morality is standing for ourselves. And I have a link to a previous note I've written about how standing for truth and morality is essentially standing for yourself, because the true self is truth and morality. That's what we're supposed to be at our core being. So that's why we have to stand up for truth and morality, because it's essentially standing up for ourselves and standing up for what's right and good for us. The true self is the authentic self that underlies all consciousness, motivations, and functions, but is being suppressed, constricted, and made unconscious by the various manifestations and expressions of the force of fear acting upon us. So it's restricting our consciousness. It's preventing us from manifesting, from self-actualization, realization, and individuation of expressing the transcendental aspects of being, which is truth, love, good, right, morality, natural law, true self, higher will, etc. My usual elaboration on the whole thing. We do not go all the way in fear and evil, for most of us, because we still have the underlying core essence influencing our sense of self and choices in life. Despite it being masked and overridden in the current system, many people develop mental schisms and fall into depression as a result of the conflict between their conditioned false self and the inability to realize and actualize the potential of their true self that is being stifled, constricted, and suppressed by the aggregate way of living we are immersed into. So that's why it's a reciprocal feedback loop. It's like an infinity loop. It's just a circle going, revolving repeatedly, feeding itself. It feeds us, we get affected by reality, the system, conditions us, we output according to what we've been fed. So it's just input, output, response, stimulus. We're not conscious beings in the process of thinking and understanding, using logic to actually process the input properly. And we get conditioned by the system, and then we output more of what the system wants in order to perpetuate the system. So it's a self-perpetuating loop, essentially. Until you can break out of it by caring for truth and morality, which is why care for truth and morality is essentially the most important thing we need to develop, and I mentioned it in another audio. I've been trying to figure it out for 2015, so I guess since 2009, so 5-6 years, trying to figure out some kind of universal truth virus, an aspect of reality that you could tell people and it's like automatically captivating, and it infects them and they want to know more and they want to spread it to other people. But it doesn't exist because everyone's on different levels of consciousness. Even though most people are in the dead in the coffin and blind in darkness, ignorant of the truth, of the light and the way, they still have different aspects of conditioning. So some people, a certain aspect of the horrors of reality might hit them hard and make them care for truth, but other people, it still won't faze them that hard. So there's still different levels of conditioning, despite the uniformity of the overall acceptance within the system and the collective hive mind aspect of the public consciousness. To continue, the last paragraph. Care for truth and morality as the expansive, blossoming force of love is what has us develop our true selves by successive embodiment of moral attributes and values. This is our true self, not the false self we are conditioned into adopting into our identity constructs. The true self is based on truth and morality, not on falsity and immorality. The latter are corruptions to our core being that we have imposed upon us through the programmable aspects of our consciousness self. Often, apart from impositions of direct conditioning, those false ways are also adopted into us through indirect conditioning of our shape-shifting chameleon ability to copy the environment and learn from it. So we become unwitting dupes in a way of imitating things and learning from it and taking them into our being. So they're not all impositions, but because many of the impositions are just free-floating around in our society, well, we can just grasp them. That's why there's problem, reaction, solution, and engineered groups artificially constructed social groups and social movements, like, or they take control of them. The CIA gets into counterculture movements and generates them into a certain direction and corrupts them. We have the Greenpeace movement, and even veganism is getting corrupted. Evil gets in everywhere. To continue, we are influenced by others' behavior and the overall environmental condition we live in, and they become impositions on our ego personality identity construct that was essentially a blank slate upon birth. Other people and the social normalization programs reinforce or diminish certain developments in our behavior to have us conform to an image or form they are trying to represent as authentic and legitimate, while in truth it is only a false proxy substitute. We become conditioned with many different characteristics that make up our particular ego personality identity construct, and most of them are barriers of falsity that prevent self-realization and self-actualization. And one of the biggest mind control tools is language itself, when you are ignorant of how language is being used against you because you don't want to learn and you don't really care for truth, so you're just going to remain a tool to language. Because people manipulate you, like they convince you anarchy just means chaos when it actually is freedom. And words like capitalism, well, just means most important in capital, and right now you think goods and services and material things, making money, that's what's important to you, so that's what the capital in your life becomes, is those things. Whereas other people choose to revalue their capital and put truth and morality as the most important thing. So my last little sentence is, it's time to stop living in darkness of falsity and live in the path and way of the light of truth. First we admit wrong, then we can imagine better. And I have a link to my article entitled the same thing. Admit wrong and imagine better. First you got to admit you're wrong, then you can imagine better and create that better place, because you can admit wrong and remove the falsity. And if you don't admit wrong, you won't admit the falsity, and then you can't actually become better because you're still holding on to what is false. Hence the importance of truth and morality. If you don't seek truth and morality, you won't look into yourself to remove what is hence immoral and untruth, things that you do wrong and other things that aren't necessarily causing harm but are wrong. Aspects of reality that we accept that are based in falsity and illusions and not for our own good. And even though we may not do harm necessarily ourselves, there is an aspect of harm involved because we're collectively involved in this enslavement. Anyways, we're in quite a mess and we got to get out of it, and truth and morality is the only way. Thank you very much for listening. Thank you for your time and attention. Have a nice day. Take care. Peace.